stakes. So we got
low stakes is good.
Yeah, exactly. I can't believe we got rugged by Yano.
I know, such a bummer.
Yeah, don't worry, he'll pay for it.
He'll come back around, I think.
It's fine.
Eventually.
Fine. Yeah. All right, let's get this kicked off. Usually I have a co-host, not like a co-guest here, so he usually does the hard work. But we've got Jed here, so
You mean the co-host usually does the hard work?
Usually the co-host.
No,
I mean,
he does writing code while this is going on.
Yeah, I know, right? All right, let's get kicked off. So very excited to have Jack and Bryce from Turnkey here with us, and I've got Jed from Infinex as well. So Bryce and Jack are the co-founders of Turnkey, which is one of the Infinex partners and a leading provider of secure wallet infrastructure. So you guys met at Coinbase custody, I guess a while ago now, right?
Yeah, it was back in 2018, I think, when we first met. We actually met building the first staking products at Coinbase. So launched Tezos staking there. And then we were the first folks on Coinbase custody, really scaling that from the ground up.
Yeah, awesome. I'm actually in one of the like Coinbase Mafia Signal groups. I don't know if you guys are the OFAC group. Are you guys in that group? I don't think I've seen you in there.
No, don't think so.
I think there's a few. It's like Luke Youngblood and a few of those guys. Like all the base guys are in there. It's basically just like meme coin chilling. You're not missing too much these days. It used to be like about NFTs, and it just became like wall-to-wall meme coins in the last like 6 months. So but yeah, so obviously you guys help us secure our private keys and enable our passkey workflow and authentication, which has been amazing for UX and onboarding for Infinex. So I think one of the reasons why we, whenever we catch up, we get along so well is because you guys are kind of taking a very similar approach to what we're doing at Infinex, but obviously building out the infra to support that. Whereas we're kind of building the front end solution for it. So I think maybe we'll get kicked off with a couple of like topical things. So last week, Google announced Willow, the quantum computing thing. I don't know if you guys saw that kind of run through the news. People were freaking out on the timeline about Bitcoin being cracked or how long it was going to take before all of our crypto was worthless. What did you guys dig into that at all, or was it sort of one of those things where you're just like, oh yeah, sure?
Yeah, I mean, we dug into it a little bit. I think it's always been like something that people in the crypto community talk about as a concern that's like potentially looming and coming out of the pipeline. I think there are concerns about quantum computing as it relates to cryptocurrency. The broader thing for me though is that like it's kind of like virtually everything you do online also is going to have issues if quantum computing really takes off. So I think there's going to be a whole lot of research and concern put into thinking about quantum resistant technology overall. My feeling is like technologies like Bitcoin are intended to be here for the long run, and so I think there's always the capability to socially coordinate to introduce quantum resistant technology and pieces of the protocol that aren't really quantum resistant. So not so concerning for me. It's like 10 years out or something. I think we're going to start being pretty concerned. But yeah, I don't know. It's a crazy development. I think it's definitely accelerated my roadmap for quantum computing.
Yeah, and my favorite part of this too was Google saying this gives credence to us living in a multiverse, and all of these computations are happening in parallel universes, which is just insane to hear someone like Google saying that.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I thought that was maybe the coolest aspect. I saw someone, Jed and I were talking about this. I saw someone tweeted out a meme where they were like, the guy with 100% of his net worth in his like 401k sitting in like a major bank is like, has anyone checked on Bitcoin? And it's like, bro, like you realize the same stuff secures your TradFi assets as well, right? Like it's all cryptography.
And of all the people to have discovered this first, like Google is probably my favorite because you know what the first thing I think they'll do? They'll break the internet. That's a good idea for them.
Yeah, exactly. So one speaking of OG cryptocurrencies, one cryptocurrency that's been getting a lot more attention lately, certainly more attention than I was expecting this cycle, has been XRP. They were in the news for all of the SEC fighting, which like I'm all about that. I think they did a really good job, kind of counteracting some of the stuff that the SEC has been doing over the last 2 or 3 years. But has there been demand on like the customer side for Ripple Ledger support? What have you guys been seeing there?
Yeah, I thought the reaction on crypto Twitter was kind of funny because everybody was really shocked that there was this big institutional kind of old school crypto that was making waves, but it feels kind of obvious that there's going to be different corners of crypto. We definitely have seen increased interest in XRP since the hype has kind of been building there. But the nice thing about Turnkey is we're very asset agnostic, and so people didn't need to ask permission or get Turnkey to do deeper integration with XRP off the bat. They could just go and add it themselves. We are, because of this interest, starting to add some higher level abstractions around XRP just to make it easier and easier with our SDKs to integrate it. But I think it feels like XRP is here to stay just because of the institutional interest that they have.
So maybe walk us through like what is the process for adding, pick a random thing that maybe you guys don't support, like Doge or something, or maybe you do already. Like what's the process? Like you say, like it's semi-permissionless. Like someone gets excited about, let's say Verge, right? What happens? How do you guys support it? What's the process? What does support even mean?
Yeah, this was kind of an atypical approach that we took. And a lot of this was building off of our experience at Coinbase adding assets. The typical approach up until this point was very, very full package asset integrations that accounted for transaction construction, transaction signing, and broadcast all in one kind of API or UI. What we wanted to do is break that up into the component pieces and really focus on that key management and signing part of it. So as long as we support the cryptographic curve of that asset uses, and the vast majority of crypto uses SecP 256K1 and ED 25519, two very common cryptographic curves, you can use Turnkey with that. On top of that, then we have modules that make it easier to use certain things. So things around address derivation, deeper SDK support, policy engine support, so on and so forth. But the nice thing is we just offer those low-level cryptographic primitives that allow you to do whatever you want.
Got it. So my reintroduction to XRP has been quite funny because like I've got this tweet that I put out in like 2020 talking about how like trading XRP is the equivalent of like liquefying street orphans for fuel for street lamps in like the 1800s, and like maybe we should not have a line that we're willing to cross, right? But funnily enough, Leshner reached out to me I think about 2 weeks ago and was like, dude, like Ripple's a real thing now. And I was I thought he was joking at first, but after like a couple of days, I was like, no, I think he's serious. And so I started looking into it, and it's pretty crazy. There's a bunch of stuff. There's like meme coin launch pads. There's like some like proto DeFi stuff. It's quite surprising how much stuff is going on there.
I was honestly impressed as well with the state of the ecosystem. Like, you launched that meme coin, and so our whole team on the weekend just degens in suddenly to Ripple. And on like getting into the network is the same kind of hard that it is everywhere. You've got to find a wallet that works. You've got to figure out which DEX to use. You've got to, actually get actual XRP out of somewhere.
Which it turns out is kind of hard. It's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, thank goodness for centralized exchanges. But once you got into the ecosystem, it was actually really nice. And the wallet I was using, I loved the security model around the way I was signing transactions by scanning QR codes on my sort of desktop. I was like, this is weird. This is not the usual pattern, but I don't hate it. It's good.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you say that, because one of the things we keep hearing is people thinking about bridging into XRP and building applications around that bridging challenge. And so I feel like there are developers thinking about those pain points even that you guys are calling out right now.
Yeah, I mean, one of the funny parts of the conversation with Leshner was like after I aped in, I was like, wow, there actually is stuff going on here. I said to him, I was like, why, like, how does no one know about this, right? And he was like, well, it's for like historical and chain racist reasons. The Ethereum community's been like debating XRP, and I just thought that was like the best turn of phrase ever, like chain racism.
Yeah, I'm gonna take that back with me. That's a good one.
Yeah, it was pretty good. It was pretty good. So maybe the last like topical thing, there was an election in the U.S. recently, which I think everyone's been paying a lot of attention to, and kind of watching with fairly keen interest in the crypto community as to like what Trump is going to do, like which of the things that he promised will he do? Is he going to free Ross on day one, et cetera? It seems like Gensler's fired himself, so that's bullish for us. But what are your thoughts on the strategic Bitcoin reserve? Do you think that's hopium, or I think Polymarket has it at like 30% odds now, or something like that. So do you guys have any thoughts on that? You think that's the thing that's going to happen?
I mean, my feeling is like even the fact that we're talking about this with any amount of like sincerity is itself a huge thing. I think it's something that people have talked about historically in the Bitcoin community for a long time, and so if like it's actually being talked about in circles that are close to the White House, that's like tremendously successful, I think. If it happens, obviously like hugely successful. But I guess I don't really have an opinion if it will happen or not.
I also just think the game theory of it is, if you think everybody's going to eventually have Bitcoin reserves at the country level, then you're going to want to be first in. And so there is a huge advantage to the US moving quickly here that feels worthwhile.
Sorry, just one sec, guys. It looks like we have lost our camera here, which has happened. It happened once before, so I don't know exactly what's going on there. I think that there's something wrong with that camera or the battery or something.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to power from USB-C, except it seems unreliable, so I think I need to go to the secondary power source for it as well. I can start to snip this part out.
Yeah, cool. It's still... Okay, there we go. All right, we're back.
Perfect.
We're back. Cool. So maybe we'll transition to something a bit more of a personal interest story. So I heard that you have a very interesting story about a burning building and a hardware wallet, and I've been very curious to. It's in our show notes, and I'm kind of desperate to hear what the background on this is.
Yeah. So working on Coinbase custody was a pretty crazy experience, because it was the very early days of institutions entering into the space, and there just wasn't infrastructure for the early crypto investors. They were kind of using a hodgepodge of ledgers or even paper wallets at times, really crazy setups just to try to keep their investment safe. One of the clients there, they were in the process of transitioning all of their assets over to Coinbase custody, but there were a handful of long tail assets that we just didn't support yet. And as they were continuing to move more and more over, at one point their office literally caught on fire. Everyone was evacuating. It was this whole big hubbub. I think somebody like left something on in the kitchen. Unclear what really happened. And the CFO left the office completely and had this oh fuck moment where they were like, holy shit, there's $50 million in a safe that is like maybe fire resistant, maybe not, and ran into the building, the burning building, to go get the ledgers. So it's one of those things where you just realize that there can be all these things that you think through in terms of security, but there's always going to be edge cases. And especially for someone whose expertise is investing, you don't want to put that security on them. You don't want to have them think about, hey, the building's on fire. Are we going to lose $50 million? It looks like we lost your camera again.
Oh, man. Okay. Sorry, guys.
That's what.
Yeah, it's got the battery.
It's just the battery's dying. It's not charging.
The battery's not charging, yeah.
Do you want to try a different cable?
It is not going to charge off the USB-C while it's streaming.
Doesn't really make. Has it got a battery in it?
Yeah, the battery's flat.
Ah, I see. Okay.
That's the
Right.
Yeah, but it's supposed to just take power from USB-C. It's like not this one. Do you want to select? Is it selected on?
No, it's not even showing up. No. Maybe we just switch to the.
This one?
Yeah, we can use that one.
Yeah, sure, that's fine.
Sorry about this, guys.
No, that's what.
Speaking of unexpected.
Is that one showing on here?
It is, in a manner of speaking.
Not a good angle.
No, not really. Let's try that. Yeah, that's better. That's better. I think that's okay. Yeah, that should be good. All right, take 4. Take something.
Where? Sorry, you were in a burning building.
Let's do it.
That's what we left.
Well, no. So this CFO that I hope that they got a bounty of some kind for recovering the crypto, or that they had a lot of equity in the company, or something. There's got to be a strong incentive to go back into a burning building.
Yeah, I think that they definitely had some incentives behind it, but you know, it's not an uncommon story. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, we got you. It's just your video is frozen. There we go.
Maybe. Yeah, we hear this all the time. Like, and I think this is like a kind of hallmark of what happened in the space at that time. Is there are people? It's kind of like the formation of institutionally oriented products, but also kind of like the long tail of different opportunities to invest in crypto. And there's just kind of this major mismatch between institutions who wanted to invest in a bunch of different assets and whether there were actually products that were able to kind of facilitate that. So when I joined Polychain, we were managing like definitely dozens, probably over 50 different positions and different, wallets and stuff, different kinds of interactions. And like Coinbase custody, when we launched, supported 4 assets, and they were Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum, and Litecoin. So like definitely not things that there was a big delta there. So, I think through that experience, at least on my end, I realized that there was an opportunity to build like good tooling that institutions and consumer products alike could basically use. Especially so at Polychain, we were doing a lot of kind of manual like custody, like hands-on kind of asset operations. Worked well for a while, and then COVID happened, and a kind of group of people would come together and have to be manually in a room together. And so suddenly, like, the whole strategy we had for moving assets was totally off the table, and we had to kind of completely rethink things. So kind of between that and then a series of other events, I was like, this is a pretty massive opportunity and would be fun to go build as well.
Yeah, I mean, I remember in the early days of synthetics, we would have these conversations all the time with institutions, and they were like, okay, so explain this whole staking thing. It wasn't just a passive asset you could hold, right? And you would kind of walk them through, okay, you got to manage a debt position and do transactions. And they would just be like, well, I can't do transactions. I don't know, I can't help you here. So it was very challenging. And I remember, we had the conversation with Coinbase custody as well to get SNX supported. And then it was like, one day we'll support SNX staking, and I still think that day has not yet arrived, right? So there's like, it's really like, it's very challenging to not just support the assets, but actually be able to support governance, be able to support voting, staking, etc. It's just a heavy lift, and crypto assets are weird. So I think that kind of institutional adoption path of like secure the assets, hold them in a safe place, you create the right controls around it. Kind of, it makes sense, but it's also a little bit of like square peg round hole sort of thing, where if you need to be able to do, especially now, right? Like almost all of the DeFi assets do things. SNX was like a bit weird back then, like you had to actually do stuff and vote and stake, and it was a very active asset. But today, like, try and manage a pendulum position, like you need to be able to do things and act on it, which is why I think that moving away from like an institutional custody type model and to a model that has like more fine-grained controls just makes sense. Like we need to support that.
Honestly though, until we build more, I kind of agree with not being able to do things like and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, because it's been something we've been thinking about a lot. And you've like you said earlier, you've kind of built half of it with the decomposition of this process, and you've sort of tackled the signing aspect. But I mean, if you're not doing stuff, that's the other way to not lose anything in terms of custody.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, we've got to get Bryce back.
I think, yeah,
he's dropped. This is
it's not our best.
We're not.
It's not our best one. I think that we are not in control of this. Maybe there's let me just ask the question.
IT is hard, audio, video, man.
We're like,
there we go.
100% programmers, 0% IT support engineers in this office.
Yeah.
I didn't want all the IT issues to be on the Infinex side, so I had to take some of the load as well.
Easy. We were just talking about institutional custody and DeFi assets, and how challenging it is when the assets do things. And I think Jed was making a point about like maybe they shouldn't do things or something along those lines.
I mean, there's multiple ways to lose your money in crypto. One is to not custody your keys safely, but the other way is to do things. And so this is something we've been thinking about a lot, because even just doing governance at Infinex, I kind of freak out every time I blind sign anything, which is basically all of the time. You can't really do anything in DeFi without some level of not knowing what you're signing. And I'm curious to hear your take on that, sort of like both with your background and your positioning in Turnkey. Like you talked about decomposing the signature and the transactions, but we're also looking at this from Infinex's perspective, thinking, there are a lot of good reasons to have this in the same engine, because then if you separate the logic of should I sign something from the authority to sign it, then you start opening up some risk.
Yeah, I think that ultimately these things do make sense living together, but building at a low level in a very modular way is just going to evolve with crypto in the right ways long term. Nobody's ever going to be able to keep up with the explosion of innovation across all the different ecosystems. And so having those core primitives that can be combined with core primitives in the Ethereum ecosystem, in the Solana ecosystem, in the Sui and Aptos and Berachain and Monad, all of those things just open things up a little bit more. But ultimately, I think the longer term, these things make sense packaged together in something like Infinex. So it's a hard problem and a good one for you guys to solve in really elegant ways. And that just drives the industry forward.
Yeah. So speaking of risk, like what are you guys seeing at the moment? Obviously every cycle has its own interesting risk profile. You guys have a pretty novel perspective coming from both, the Coinbase custody side as well as what you're building now with Turnkey. What are you seeing? Like what's on your radar in terms of risk for projects?
So we always think about supply chain attacks. It's like the one thing I think broadly the crypto industry ignores kind of to an insane degree. Really interesting one happened a couple weeks ago with I think it's Solana Web3.js was the NPM package. You guys see that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That was crazy. I mean, I think this is something we've talked about and thought about a ton for, basically since the beginning of Turnkey. But broadly, I think developers in the crypto space and broader than crypto, it's kind of a problem everywhere, but people just blindly update packages left, right, and center. And when it comes down to it, particularly the node ecosystem, has basically many, many fine-grained packages and not a ton of controls over what's signed and basically not a ton of controls over, in many cases, the permissions of GitHub and stuff for a lot of these dependencies. And so supply chain attacks are something that is just super scary. And I think, fortunately, I think this attack resulted in something like under $1,000 worth of loss or something. It really wasn't that substantial. So I'm really optimistic, I guess, that it kind of puts supply chain attacks as a real threat on a lot of people's radar without it having actually lost a ton of money. But yeah, we think about supply chain attacks all the time, dependency reviews, internal supply chain, or internal reviews as well. That's kind of the constant persistent one we think about.
So on the app dev side, of course, there's a bunch of dependencies and things. I mean, one of the funny things when Jed joined, I guess like 18 months ago or something like that, I think we were like 2 weeks in, and he was like, so I can basically own all of the DeFi projects. And I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah, I can almost guarantee that I'm in your supply chain somewhere if you're using JavaScript.
Yep.
Yeah. But we think about it, I think, from like an app dev front end perspective. There's a bunch of front end packages, and like obviously you guys have packages that you're inheriting, but maybe naively it seems like that would be less of a problem for you in what you're building, but maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead, Bryce.
I was going to say, I think it actually informed a lot of the design of Turnkey. Our view is actual private key material should not be anywhere close to the front end. And we have this process of abstracting away private keys to different authentication methods like Passkeys, like you guys use. And the really nice thing about that is Passkeys require hardware. Passkeys require kind of biometrics most of the time. And that, if somebody gets it, isn't going to be useful for them without the hardware or biometrics. Whereas a private key, if somebody is able to get access to that private key is burned. They're always going to be able to access the funds on that.
Yeah, that separation of like how you authenticate and your actual authorization starting to see, we're also working to try and bring more of that into the crypto ecosystem, because historically they've been very much the same thing. One of the things that bugs me is like anything that I do, including signing into a random dApp to see something, is like it's using my highest level of signing authority in order to just be like, hi, I'm Jed. You know, that doesn't feel like a sustainable thing to be doing. Anyway, I'm super curious to just hear a little bit more about how you think about this, because it's honestly something that we think about a lot. I literally lost sleep last night just going through. We've got a release coming up, and I'm kind of one of the final sign-off checks on all that stuff. And I actually went through a PM log file to just be like, do I know what's coming in with this release? Which is like trying to poke your eyes out with forks. And one of the things was, you know, one of our front-end developers had introduced a new package for our new OTP UI. And I went looking on GitHub, and I'm like, okay, they've got an automated release process. I can see the number of maintainers on the project. Like, should we be pulling this, you know, sort of new bag of risk in on the front end? But that's kind of coming from a long history in open source and front end and kind of assessing stuff like that. And I'd love to know what tricks you've learned, or just even how you reason about this with regards to dependencies, because like you can isolate them, you can reduce them, you can try and monitor them. How do you do this?
I mean, I think a lot of it is separation of like domains. So we have like an incredibly high bar basically you have to meet in order to ship a new dependency into the enclave code. Like it's just I don't think we've changed a dependency there other than like bumping versions that are, you know, directly a result of, you know, basically like we know there's an issue with the dependency, we need to bump it in quite a long time. So we're just very strict about like what we actually bring into the super sensitive environments. The challenge, I think I would say we don't have like a truly differentiated view on NPM packages right now. And it's something that consistently keeps me up at night. I just think it's a really tough ecosystem. And when we take a really hard view, like I'm very resistant when people want to bring in new dependencies for sure. But the reality is like crypto moves quickly. And if we want to support a variety of crypto applications, you have to bring in dependencies that are like common in the crypto ecosystem. And that's just a lot of surface area oftentimes. So yeah, I think it's a problem that it's not going to be one company that pushes it forward. There's going to have to be a huge industry-wide and sort of like internet-wide, you know, kind of like massive push to really understand the issues with supply chain management or supply chain dependencies. And I don't know, it's not going to be solved overnight as well.
So you don't have a silver bullet solution for us. That's sad. I was hoping that's the answer we were going to get. Oh, you just this one simple trick, and then
I wish. No, I mean, I think it's separation of concerns is the biggest thing I have. The
other thing that we're doing, and actually honestly looking at the way that you document some of the stuff that you guys do is quite, you know, it's nice to see where on this mission to try and isolate the code that can actually touch the live wires as much as possible, like the way you're describing with the secret enclave, like this amount of code over here needs to move like every couple of days. This little piece over here should be like really tightly isolated and quite tightly held in terms of how it gets updated and when and what it can pull in. And you're also using TEs to run that. I'm curious actually to hear about that. Like these are the idea that you can actually run isolated code even in a sort of distributed scalable environment is definitely becoming part of the security landscape. Tell us a bit more about your journey building with them and like what else do you think is sort of in store with that technology?
Yeah. So basically day one of Turnkey, we decided to use Nitro enclaves. We've been building against them since, you know, the earliest things. Like I think literally the first line of code that was written for Turnkey was on Quorum OS, which is our kind of the operating system that actually runs all of our Enclave applications. So we've developed, a lot of muscle around kind of how to iterate in that environment, and just a lot of I think patterns for how to basically build applications that interact with each other. It's been it's been very challenging. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The reason it's called Quorum OS is because essentially we wanted to make a guarantee that a quorum of people at Turnkey, in the case right now, but eventually hopefully a quorum of people outside of Turnkey, have to participate in the reconstruction of a secret in Quorum OS. And only after that quorum has done that and the secret reconstructed can the application actually do anything in our backend. So this can be used to authenticate one enclave to another enclave. It can be used to, in some cases, decrypt secret material. So many kind of different use cases for this key that gets reconstructed. But yeah, and then I think another thing is we've invested extremely heavily into the attestability of enclave code in our backend, using remote attestation, which is a sort of feature of a lot of TEEs. And that's its own whole rabbit hole where we had to go down. We take a really strong view that remote attestation doesn't really give you anything in your backend unless all the artifacts that are being remotely attested to are deterministically buildable. And so we've gone down this whole path to make every single Rust-based and enclave deployed artifact in Turnkey's backend be deterministic, which is a crazy process. Check out StageX, which is a project that we kind of kicked off at Turnkey, basically, which is a tool chain for building deterministic artifacts. So definitely check that out. And then we've also just had to build a ton of tooling basically to make this work well, to be able to remotely attest to the enclaves, and then also work well as a from an infrastructure just deployment point of view. It's pretty tricky. So tons of development here. But I think now that we've actually stood up this very solid verifiable layer, I think there's so many places they can go in crypto. So excited. I think we have some ideas around how we want to leverage that in 2025, and definitely gonna expand beyond just the current set of Turnkey enclave applications into some other fun areas.
Cool. Yeah, I mean that sounds super interesting for stuff that we're doing as well. I saw that you've written your own operating system, and I've been curious about that for a bit. So it fills in some of the blanks. Zooming back up in the stack for a second, right? Back to Passkeys, the stuff that you guys didn't write yourselves. We've got our own journey with Passkeys. I'd love to hear yours. At what point in the Turnkey journey did you feel like they were becoming a viable thing? And where do you sort of see that going at the moment?
We've actually been betting on this type of authentication since the beginning of Turnkey. So there are no passwords anywhere to be seen in the Turnkey experience. From the very beginning, we invested really heavily in WebAuthn before Passkeys were really becoming mainstream. And then what we were seeing is folks were just looking for a more secure way for users to authenticate to their wallets. They were realizing that even traditional Web 2 authentication standards with email and one-time passwords or OAuth and so forth weren't secure when you got to the scales that a lot of people were ambitious to go after. So it was kind of our customers leading us there, our intuition leading us there. And from the very beginning, we just invested really heavily behind that. I think ultimately, everyone who's played around with Passkeys long enough realizes that there are a couple rough edges there. I mean, password managers are always trying to sneak in and record the passkeys because I think they see the writing on the wall that passwords are not going to be managed for much longer. And at the same time, all of those rough edges are getting smoothed out very, very quickly. So it feels like it is this magical experience that we've all been promised around crypto, and especially because Web 2 is following suit, and Google and Apple and even Target, the big box store, is supporting Passkeys now. it's just going to be everything that, you know, our grandparents are using and people are used to.
Yeah, it's been really nice actually not having any email addresses or passwords in the system. It's like the first time I've built a large scale user application that has users without any of that in the middle of it. And it's just like all of this knowledge that we built up around how to deal with passwords can just, like, we haven't needed to build any of that.
Yeah, it's toxic.
Yeah,
no one wants to build it.
Yeah, it was funny when Jed first pitched me on Passkeys. I'd heard about them, but it was in this kind of other domain. I was like, well, we don't need to worry about that because, you know, we have hardware wallets, right? And so I was very skeptical. I was like, yeah, I don't know about this. But, you know, at the same time, we were planning to build a system with like usernames and passwords, which in hindsight, like, would have been an absolute disaster. Like, just it would have been the worst possible thing that we could have done. So it took me like trying them out, and I was still kind of squinting at it, being like, I don't know about this. And then we did it, and like, it's been one of the best things that we've done, I would say. Yeah. Right? You know, it was quite funny when we realized we had like 20,000 users signed up and no way to contact them at all because we just emails, and we're like, this is strange. You know, like, it's not that weird because I'm used to it from like a DeFi perspective, but to build like an application and not have any way to know, you know, how to contact a user was sort of funny. And we built this this feature where we could like put a banner on an individual user's account to like kind of flag it, to be like, hey, here's some information that you would like normally just email them, right? But we're like, hey, thanks for logging in. So yeah, it's been very interesting. I mean, I think for me, you know, I still have more trust, I guess, in my hardware wallet for probably like dumb reasons that actually don't even make that much sense anymore. But yeah, like the whole trade-off between like Passkey auth and you know, hardware wallet auth is a really interesting space, I think. So, I mean, I'm kind of curious how you guys. You said, you know, you don't have passwords in inside Turnkey. Like, have you really leaned into like the internal controls around Passkeys for things, or, you know, what are you using for your auth internally?
Yeah, so we use Passkeys. I mean, go ahead, Jack, if you want to.
Yeah, we use Passkeys heavily, and we use this basically like an SSO solution, internal SSO solution, and Passkeys controlling authentication to that for most everything. It's not perfect, but yeah, we try and, you know, dog food it as much as possible.
It's one of those things where so much of it is on the ecosystem side, which usually goes really badly. One of the things I liked about Passkeys is there is so much attention kind of from a, like, if you look at the financial incentives of the whole internet, like everyone in any way remotely connected to money online, which is much bigger than just crypto, is spending more money on fraud than almost anything else. And so like the whole WebAuthn initiative to make this the solution was one of the things that gave us a lot of confidence that if we roll this out, like we catch this wave here, because the incentive is too great to fix passwords finally, and it looks like we've got a way to do it now. That was super exciting.
But it is surprising to me, like, as someone who's been, you know, in the web for a long time, like, there's been so many, you know, 15th standard problems that, you know, like, oh, we are gonna, like, the idea that everyone was able to coordinate around this and actually get to a solution, kind of mind-blowing. Like, there's not that many examples that I can think of historically that have worked. You know, of course there's rough edges, but like at a fundamental level, it's working and everyone's adopting it. And you know, were you guys surprised by that, or were you just like, YOLO, we're leaning into it?
I mean, I think I feel like we saw it coming for a while. So like, you know, you saw biometrics start being rolled out in like every Mac in, I think, 2017 or something like that. And I think you just play it out and you say, okay, like it's going to take a while for these devices to be ubiquitous. You know, people keep a Mac for, I don't know, 3-4 years, something like that. So at some point down the road, you know, the whole history of Macs that are in kind of actual usage are going to be equipped with biometrics. And it's only at that point where it's going to make sense for large tech giants to push this forward. So I think we kind of, when we were starting Turnkey, like played that back, and we were like, it's pretty much at the point now where people are going to really start pushing this. And to your point, I mean, I don't think like you as an individual company, you're not going to be able to push forward a standard like this. It's really going to have to come on the back of Apple, Google, Microsoft, et cetera. And so I think, yeah, we played it out and we were like, this is something we want to go all in on. And we kind of, like early on at Turnkey, there was no authentication other than WebAuthn for like the first year of the product or something like that. So we definitely kind of burned the ships on that one, and you know, definitely glad we did.
I mean, you guys have been, you obviously you've been building the web for a long time as well. Like, do you think that this is a sort of unique moment of like coordination versus, you know, like there's such a long history of like adversarial standards of like someone comes up with a standard as like kind of a backdoor attack on their competitors or whatever. Like the idea of like Microsoft and Google and, you know, Samsung and Amazon all working together around, like, it just feels a bit strange to me.
We got Passkeys a lot faster than we got good CSS.
Yeah. True. I mean, yeah, to me, it's like, it's somehow simultaneously good UX and good security. And I think the sort of like both of those happening simultaneously in a major web feature is pretty unparalleled. And I kind of chalk it up to that, I guess, but I don't know.
I think it also supports Apple and Google's ecosystems. You know, they have native syncing across their devices. It makes it easier if you have both a MacBook and an iPhone to have your passkey syncing there. And so I do think from a strategic perspective, they were thinking, hey, that this is creating more lock-in to our ecosystem or more benefits for our users.
That's actually a really good point. Like my access to my Infinex account is in iCloud, and there's no way I'm leaving iCloud.
100%. Yeah.
Probably ever. They have no. I mean, there are some updates to standards coming out to make them shareable across different password manager ecosystems, which is both probably like long-term important, because I don't think it's actually viable to lock people in with stuff like this that long-term.
Agreed.
But also terrifying from a safety and sort of security design perspective. Luckily, it's Apple and Google and Microsoft's job to solve that and do it well and not lose all the money in this case. So,
yeah, I feel like we're past like an adoption tipping point now of like, even if there is something wrong, they've all just got to figure it out. Like they you know, I'm sure there's something that could cause it to break down, but like it does feel to me like we're definitely past the wave of adoption where like winding this back is going to be harder than just, you know, kind of pushing through and figuring out those rough edges.
Totally. Yeah, I completely agree on that.
Can you mention the hardware wallet and feeling more secure with that earlier? Like Bryce and Jack, what do you guys think the futures of hardware wallets in crypto?
I think it's interesting talking so much about passkeys, because if you go to first principles, what were hardware wallets really trying to solve? It's a hardware wallet. Yeah, passkeys are hardware wallets. You have this separate device that is linked to your ability to access. And the amazing thing is you don't have to buy a separate device. Everybody has a hardware wallet in their pocket with passkeys.
It has a way better touchscreen than my Trezor.
Yes. I do think, you know, even going back to the beginning of the conversation, the other piece here is how can you make sure that you're not blind signing? So a lot of hardware wallets have really good transaction parsing in order to have a separate view of, hey, is this trade on Uniswap actually what I think it's going to be? Or is this a malicious dApp that's trying to drain my wallet? So I do think that that's one thing that, again, we need to get right as we think about long-term adoption of passkeys and not replacing hardware wallets fully. But ultimately, it feels like hardware wallets are going to be kind of the cassette tapes of crypto in 5 years, and it's going to be a great memory that people have of running into on fire buildings and don't have to worry about them anymore.
But you know, it's funny. I set up the new ledger with the e-ink screen, right?
Mm-hmm.
A couple weeks ago. Just we get new hardware wallets, we test them out, and I was like, honestly, if you said to me, do you want to use your Kindle as a hardware wallet, I would be like, get the fuck away from me. Like, what are you talking about? And like, this is like somehow a worse version of the Kindle, and like the screen wraps around the edge. I'm just like, this is not it. Like, whatever this is not the thing.
It's not even that. It's like, I got that and I started trying to use it to sign a bunch of transactions that I'm used to signing. And the whole angle is that you said this, it's better at actually parsing the transaction and telling you what you're signing. But what I've found is that for most of the stuff I'm signing, the only way they've got of improving that UX is to make you more terrified. Like, it's a big screen, and so it's clearer, but you don't know what you're signing. And that you're going to lose all your money.
Yeah, you can get a lot more of the hex blob on the screen now. It's cool.
And it warns you. It's like, by the way, if you sign this, you've probably lost your money. Are you really, really sure? And I'm like, absolutely not. I think blind signing generally is kind of heading in this, like, something's got to give here. And because that's not it, right? Like, and our kind of internal take here is like, DeFi kind of broke Ethereum in a lot of ways, I think, because people built these sort of increasingly interesting and sophisticated uses. Like, if you just use it for moving Ether out, it's great. You can see what's going on with the transaction.
Or even tokens. Like, tokens are fine. It's like
20.
Address, destination, token, fine.
Yeah, but like, vote on this random proposal on Snapshot, or connect to this scam website to claim your Pengu airdrop. Like, they look the same. And because DeFi's got this functionality, you're kind of like signing it's like the equivalent of a engineer having to sign off on a user having to sign off on a database execution plan without even being able to see the query that generated it. It's like,
very scary.
I mean, we've invested in transaction parsing capabilities that actually get executed in the enclaves. On some level, it's hard, because I think as soon as you start supporting like that level of support for an asset, other people want it at like every different ecosystem you support. But I think it's got to be something like that, pushing the parsing and the verification all the way into, in our case, the trusted environment in enclaves. Or if you can build out a really sophisticated hardware wallet with a better screen, maybe that looks like a phone, I don't know, like pushing the parsing down into there. But I totally agree. Like, blind signing is just completely untenable if we want to, like, really make this be a widely used thing in the world.
It's kind of like the little thing that everyone already in crypto just ignores, and it's very secure. Just don't look. We don't talk about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think it's actually in the parsing of the transactions that the security will come from ultimately, though? Or because you kind of end up in a race where, like, how clever can you be at constructing a transaction that's going to do something unexpectedly malicious? How much can you obscure that from the user? Because maybe it's on the hardware wallet, but it's got to go through like the little browser extension. Like, you've got so many different competing standards there that all have to adhere to the same fundamental set of limitations. Like, I don't know. I genuinely wonder if we're going to be able to get all the way through that, particularly with new blockchains coming out, like different takes on all of these different standards. If you look at even on Near, which we've been integrating recently, to get enough usage in that ecosystem, and they've got a lot of usage, but to get to the point where you can then also parse all of their transactions, and then you've got Sui over here doing their thing, and you've got, everyone forgot about XRP. Like, it seems like we're going to be chasing our tail. Or do you think there's maybe some other way of, I don't know, have you thought about any other ways that we could approach the blind signing problem generally?
I think maybe the controversial take is mass market crypto users shouldn't immediately have open access to all of DeFi, because there are just too many ways to shoot yourself in the foot. And I think we're seeing a ton of kind of takes like Infinex, where you're giving a limited, more scoped access to DeFi in a way that's really, really consumer friendly. And you just ratchet up the security because of that. If you're not allowing them to go to the random Pengu airdrop website, then they're not going to be able to get scammed on that Pengu airdrop site. And so I think that there needs to be this progressive onboarding of users. There needs to be segregation of risk. You shouldn't be connecting your main bank account to the Pengu airdrop scam site, but like maybe you have
I mean, at this point, it's like you're connecting your 401k to the Pengu airdrop, right? It's not even your main bank account. It's like, this is my life savings.
Yeah.
Here you like, I hope this works, right? Like,
totally. Yeah. And so I think like figuring out how that's maybe another controversial take. It is this idea of having one global crypto wallet that you use everywhere. I just don't think makes sense. And I don't think users are actually asking for it. I think people are really used to having segregated accounts. And the magic of crypto is not that it's one account across all the apps. It's that you can abstract all of those protocols into one experience. And that's where the composability is where things get really exciting. So I think ultimately people are going to have a lot of different wallets that may have different security setups. For certain social apps, SMS authentication is going to be great. But for things that your 401k, you should be using Passkeys, you should be using hardware authentication. So I just think it's going to be an evolution, and we're not going to get it right. But I think there's going to be some trusted folks in the middle that are helping to progressively onboard users and bring them into kind of a safer corner of crypto.
Yeah. From your position as Turnkey, do you see a lot of the risks and hacks and vulnerabilities that are emerging in crypto? Is that something that you guys like? What are some other ones that you've seen pop up lately?
To be honest, we don't see them that often from our perspective, because I think a lot of it is pretty vanilla scams. It's a lot of folks just being like, hey, you're going to connect your wallet to this and you're going to give me more permissions than you think you're giving. And I'm going to take your crypto because of that. And with embedded wallets through Turnkey, that's not really as much of a problem, because they're giving more scoped access to a specific job to be done, a specific set of features. I don't know, Jack, do you have anything you've been seeing?
I mean, I think it's another, going back to Passkeys for a second. Like, Passkeys are really, really phishing resistant, and it's very hard to scam someone if they're using that. If they're, the authentication method they're using is bound to a particular domain. There's like a crazy, I'm not 100% sure this is true still, but for a long time at least, and it might still be true, I think there had never been an account takeover of a Coinbase user where the Coinbase user was using like YubiKey, like hardware authenticator, as their MFA device. Yeah. I mean, that's millions and millions of users. And also recognizing that the people who have hardware MFA devices on their account probably inherently have a pretty, a more crypto, basically. So yeah, I think from our point of view, it's almost like the application develop, like we're like one click below that almost. And I guess we haven't seen anything super novel recently.
So I put this in our blog post a couple months ago, that I was one of the largest Infinex users, right? I had like 8 figs in Infinex. Obviously, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this was to be confident that like I'm not YOLOing other people's money without like having, enough assets at risk that I'm like not sleeping, comfortably at night, right? And making sure that all of this, the stuff that we're working on is kind of as locked down as possible. What do you guys think about that? From like a,
do you think that's too risky?
Yeah. Do you think that's crazy?
Keep in mind, you are securing his money. So
yeah. Like, I guess my first point is like, I don't know that I would be talking about it on a podcast.
It's kind of interesting, right? Because like, I think as a DeFi OG, like my crypto's somewhere, right? Like it has to be somewhere. And I've talked a lot about OPSEC in different places at different times. 95% of my crypto is secured by Gnosis safes. And, I've got a whole bunch of things that I do through my family office to make sure my OPSEC is as locked down as possible and that I can't access my funds. I suppose the Infinex funds are, in theory, more at risk because they're secured by passkeys versus, hardware wallets. The reason why I haven't been that worried about it, I guess, is because Infinex has been very locked down to you can only withdraw money to your recovery account, which is a Gnosis safe in my case. So like it can kind of go into Infinex or go back out of Infinex. It hasn't been that risky, but maybe that OPSEC changes, and I need to update my my priors on my OPSEC.
Yeah, I think the nice thing is there are ways to even evolve the functionality of Infinex for really large holders like yourself. So Turnkey's policy engine could allow you to add multi-party approvals on these things and have multiple passkeys required. And that way, somebody can't come with a rubber hose and beat you until you touch ID.
Yeah.
And so I think those things over time are going to be really important for the super large holders on Infinex.
Yeah, that makes sense. We actually had a funny conversation early on where I was like, the mode that I would prefer of Infinex, because we were going through different like auth methods and stuff. I was like, I want an auth method where like every time I do, like you've probably seen the meme of like the signing a transaction in that like GameFi meme where like every time they go to shoot they have to like sign a transaction. I don't know if you guys saw that. I'm like, I want that version but for Infinex where like every time I click a button to like go back I've got to like sign a transaction on my Trezor. But yeah, I think that there's a few different ways that we've been thinking about this. Like one is like this idea of like vaults versus wallets. We're just about to launch this new kind of security architecture where we have a vault, which is an on-chain, smart account that can be locked down using on-chain security, right? Like we can lock that down and prevent withdrawals to only certain whitelisted addresses, et cetera. And then you can have a wallet, which is more like a hot wallet that hopefully doesn't have as much money, right? And so if you have a time lock or something like that on that vault, then all of a sudden you get closer to like my posture in Kraken, which is much more locked down, right? And has time locks and daily withdrawal limits and an address book that you can't like get through without MFA. Like there's a whole kind of setup that I think has kind of evolved for centralized exchanges for for OPSEC and various other things. So I think we're getting closer to that, like replicating that on chain where it's like, okay, the majority of my funds are over here and are not really accessible, quickly, right? To your point, like the wrench attack, Bryce, right? Like you can wrench me, but you can't get the funds out of the vault. So it's kind of pointless.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think of it as like I think of like the lost backpack or stolen backpack sort of framing here. Like I should at any point in time be comfortable with somebody coming up to me on the street and asking for my backpack and just be like totally good with handing it to them and feel like I wasn't actually losing anything substantial, basically. And I think that's going to happen in a ton of ways, and on-chain primitives being definitely one of them that I think we're going to see a lot of iteration on in the coming years. That gets harder though as we move into a very composable cross ecosystem environment. Like how do you replicate the same level of permissions in new nascent ecosystems that you're coming to expect from ETH-L1 or something? That's definitely like a UX security challenge I think we're going to see. But yeah, excited about all that.
Even synchronization of data cross chains has been one of the things that it's taken us a couple of years to feel like we've gotten right. And by gotten right, I really mean found ways not to have to do. Initially, our recovery posture, as Kain mentioned, like you can always eject from an Infinex account on chain. If Turnkey explodes, if Infinex explodes, if anything else goes wrong, as long as Ethereum and Solana are running, then you can still get your money out of your on-chain vault. And for people who are on-chain already, this is one of the differences between the vault and the wallet, is that the vault has this kind of like completely resistant to anything going wrong recovery model, whereas the wallet is a little bit more I guess, consumer friendly in its recovery modes. Like, we're going to be using some of your recovery features as a way to help people recover their funds if something goes wrong in the wallet space. But synchronizing that state across chains initially was really challenging. So if you updated it on Arbitrum, you immediately have to go and update it on Base and Ethereum and Solana. And like, you've also got to be able to transactions, and you're sort of taking like what the user feels like is one signature from a UX perspective, and then doing a bunch of stuff with that signature. And you have to protect that from yourself, because if you can do a bunch of stuff with a single signature, then did the user really sign it? Like, what other issues sort of enter because of that? And it sort of actually gets so complex that we ended up pivoting towards more of a centralized platform trust model, where it doesn't, it's really important, and we're using CCQ to handle that on demand instead. But you can't really do that for stuff like daily spending limits, because how much have you spent on this chain? To immediately sort of verify that on another chain is really hard. So we've actually ended up combining the user's signature, which goes into like unlock the passkey, get the signature from Turnkey, put that on the transaction, with a platform signature as well, where our platform can go and understand the state of these, like all the user's account across all the chains. And then it can also sign off and say, yeah, this is something I think the user should be able to do as well. Which kind of works for stuff like cross-chain daily spending limits and other security features, where the user still has kind of ultimate custody through their passkey. But, you know, it's sort of seeing all these different patterns emerge, basically.
So maybe we'll move to more of a market outlook. What's something that you guys were super convinced about in the past, whether it's like while you're building Turnkey or just generally in the market, that turned out to be incorrect?
Good question.
Yeah, I think one that quickly comes to mind for me is working on a really regulated custodian. I, for a long time, thought, hey, custodial products are going to be the way. This is going to get super regulated. There's going to be a lot of stringent requirements around how people are able to access DeFi. And that's just going to be the way that the mass market accesses things. I think what I didn't take into account is regulators were very slow to approve centralized parties and how they are able to access with certain parts of DeFi. So, you know, Coinbase rolling out things around staking, rolling out other things around governance and DeFi access and all these other things took just like months and months and months of really hand-holding regulators to understand the topic and to get comfortable with them. And so I think we've seen, especially over the last 2 years, this really seismic shift towards everything's non-custodial. You don't need to ask permission. The user's in control. You are able to access kind of the full gambit of crypto through that. And I think the game changer there is we're now able to offer experiences that feel like a Coinbase, feel centralized in how easy they are, but they're fully non-custodial. The user's fully in ownership of that private key.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously coming out of Coinbase, you know, the emergence of Base and how much of a push there's been there has been quite interesting to watch. Like, do you guys have a hot take on Base and where you think that will evolve?
Yes.
Basically, I'm saying, do you think there's going to be a token? That's the question.
That's the important question.
Yeah, that's the critical question. Yeah.
I don't know if there will be a token. I'll say this. I think it's incredibly done already. Like it's more successful than I think already than I think a lot of people expected it to be from the get-go. Like it's clearly there's something there. My hot take is that historically Coinbase like really prided itself on being an asset agnostic platform and like an ecosystem agnostic platform. And this feels like from a product strategy point of view, kind of the antithesis of that. Like they're saying, we are going into this one ecosystem, and this is like where we're kind of spreading our wings and trying to make it work. And I don't know that it's their whole like strategy is going to be beholden to that being successful, but I think it's definitely a change in how they view the market and view, you know, kind of Coinbase's position with respect to like all these different crypto ecosystems.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. I've talked about that before, where it feels like a very opinionated, you know, path forward for them. I don't think it necessarily locks them into an ecosystem, but it's definitely a lot of momentum towards one ecosystem. And even like within the Ethereum EVM ecosystem, like a sub ecosystem of like the super chain, you know, like it's not an agnostic play. Like, and it's hard to unwind that, you know, once you've kind of gone deep into it.
Totally. I'm like kind of surprised, honestly, that if they decided to do something, you know, very on chain, that they didn't just kind of say, hey, we're spinning up our own L1 and like, you know, come play in our zone or not. But, you know, they obviously have a crazy amount of engineering power behind them. They have a crazy amount of cash behind them. It's kind of it's an interesting strategy, but like to their credit, I think it's working right now. So
yeah, agreed.
Yeah,
for sure. All right, so no token. Got it. I mean, the interesting thing is the token would only accelerate that, right? Like if you believe that like there's a, you know, if you're trying to maintain this agnostic approach, it's like, well, once we, you know, have a token that you can buy instead of coin, it's like now there's like a real tension between like where's the actual bet, you know, it's an ERC20 on a particular L2 in a particular ecosystem. Like that feels like that's a hard directional bet to unwind. That's a real one-way door. So
yeah,
totally.
So what's the most contrarian bet that you guys have made in building Turnkey that wasn't Passkeys?
One thing that might not be as contrarian anymore, I think we initially built Turnkey with machine-based transactions in mind instead of user-based transactions in mind. A lot of folks were really focused on this user onboarding problem, and I think we went a little bit lower level than all of that, and we expected that businesses were going to be automating trillions of transactions at some point. AI agents we didn't really think about back then, but now it's very obvious are going to be driving a ton of activity in crypto ecosystems. And so I think while everyone else was talking about this user onboarding piece, we focused more on the machine base. And then because we went so low level, we were able to add on the user onboarding and user-based transaction, non-custodial embedded wallet side of the house to that low-level infrastructure. So yeah, I think overall that low-level approach felt very contrarian at the time, and I think has played out really, really well for us.
Yeah, awesome. Final question: what do you think is underhyped at the moment in the space? What are you guys seeing?
Okay, let me think here. Okay, I think Bryce was talking about AI agents, and I think, not going to say that that's underhyped.
That would be very contrarian to say underhyped, but okay.
But what I like within that, I think what is underhyped is we're going to see so many different like instances of AI agents playing around in crypto, and I think there's not enough emphasis right now put on proof of personhood and like web of trust style stuff. So like, how do I know who I'm interacting with? How do I know that's a person? Can I contextualize my relationship to them? Can I contextualize their relationship to this protocol? Like, I think there's going to have to be like a massive build out in that space. I think, you know, there are projects that think about that, right? Like I think WorldCoin, controversial or not, like is thinking about that for sure. But I think, you know, there's going to be, it just feels like a like complete requirement if you think that AI agents are going to be super successful, that we'd also need a ton of build out in that direction.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the thesis of like AI agents will need a way to interact with the world, and like crypto just makes a lot of sense. Like they're not going to be running around with sacks of cash. You know, I think that you know, that absolutely Makes sense. One thing that I've noticed in this kind of AI agent meta is there's a new thing on X where it shows that I've got like AI reply guys now. I don't know if you've seen, and it shows automated, and I've been trying to, I actually haven't dug into that. I don't know if you guys have noticed that, but it's gone to the point where like every tweet of mine now has like 3 or 4 AI reply guys. And I'm not sure what the angle is. At some point, I'm sure they're going to, figure out some attack vector, but it seems super crazy. They'll be shilling me their tokens soon.
Yeah, I think everybody's been pretty inspired by the Truth Terminal experiment, and we've seen a lot of people trying to build out kind of like pump fun versions of that, where you can create your own AI agent that is going to shill your token and has a Twitter account connected to it and all these things. So I think it's about to get real messy. It's going to be kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, like it's zero marginal cost reply guys. Like reply guys used to be fairly expensive to make, right? It took 20 years or something like that to build a reply guy. Now it's like 20 seconds. So I don't know. It feels dark. Maybe there will be some. I feel like that automated tag is like a thing where like the next step is like, you give me a way to nuke them somehow. But we'll see. We'll see what Elon gives us.
It's going to be interesting. Brave new world.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, this is really fun, guys. Thanks very much for jumping on. And yeah, very excited to keep building out the XRP ecosystem with you.
Amazing. It was a pleasure, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.